This is the Fire Dog Podcast.
The views and opinions presented on today's episode are those of the speaker and do not necessarily represent the views of the Department of Defense or the United States Air Force.
Welcome, my name is Matt Wilson. Thank you for listening to episode 26 of the Fire Dog Podcast. Before we get going, please take a minute to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen, and also leave us a 5-star review if you listen on Apple Podcasts. We're trying to reach as many DoD firefighters as possible so that we can connect them with information that can add value to their careers and their fire departments. Your review directly contributes to this growth and helps build the show's credibility. I'd also like to take this moment to remember AJ Beck and Justin House, 2 Air Force firefighters whom we recently lost. If you're going through a hard time, please lean on your department and installation support systems. They're there for you and will drop whatever they're doing to give you a hand. We all go through struggles in life, some worse than others, and we all deal with them in different ways. I'm here to tell you that you're not alone and that there's thousands of people who care about you and want to help. If you need to talk to someone right now, please reach out to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255 and speak immediately with a trained professional. You can also contact your local chaplain, military and family life counseling program, or your unit first sergeant. If you're not comfortable reaching out to any of those resources, don't hesitate to contact us here at the Fire Dog Podcast by dropping us a message on Facebook or Instagram. Your life matters, and we're here for you if you need us. So thanks again for tuning in to listen to episode 26 of the Fire Dog Podcast. Our guests today are Contingency Training or Silver Flag instructors at Tyndall Air Force Base, Florida, and Anderson Air Force Base, Guam. They join me today to talk about their role in preparing firefighters to operate in real-world contingency environments. Please welcome Nathan Hutslar and Erik Montes. All right, welcome, gentlemen. It's great to have you on.
Great to be on.
Silver Flag, something that I think a lot of people are interested to hear about. See what's changed, see what it's like. Maybe there's some out there that want to be Silver Flag instructors, and so they're logging on to listen and find out what it's all about. I'd just like to start off by having each of you introduce yourself. Tell us where you're from, how long you've been in the Air Force, where you've been stationed so far. Nate, you can go first.
Yeah, so my name is Tech Sergeant Nathan Hutslar. I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana, or around Indianapolis. That's what I claim. Been in the Air Force about 10 years. Did some time at Langley, and been out at Tyndall for about 3 years as a Silver Flag cadre. So last year I took over the NCOIC spot, and I'll be doing that about another year before we hire my replacement. So that's what I have to look forward to. Not sure where I'm going next, but I'm ready for it.
What about you, Erik?
Yeah, Technical Sergeant Erik Montes, right? I work at Northwest Field over at Guam, Silver Flag instructor. My previous assignments have been to Cannon Air Force Base for 4 years. I was at Kunsan for a year, Patrick for 3 years, and then the opportunity to come to Guam presented itself. So I jumped on it, and I'm glad I did. Most people would think I'd be crazy to leave Patrick because, you're from Florida, right? You're at Florida right now, Nathan. So most people don't want to leave Florida, but couldn't pass up the awesome opportunity.
Yeah, man, that was a hell of a move to make. Florida to Guam, which Guam's pretty nice, though.
Guam's not bad at all. My first assignment was Cannon, so I kind of have a good perspective on any assignment, right? Nothing bad against Cannon. My first 2 years, I didn't know how to appreciate what I had, so my last 2 years there were a lot better than my first two. And then every assignment afterwards, it sounds cliche, but it is what you make of it, right? I've loved every assignment.
Yeah, 100%. So how did each of you get the job? Was it advertised? Did somebody reach out to you? How did it work?
Yeah, so both for me. I knew somebody that was down here looking to hire just a normal instructor. Got on AMS and applied. Had to actually go through an interview process, a telephone interview with the flight chief that used to be down here, and they just selected me from then on.
For me, it was I saw it on AMS. It wasn't initially one of my first choices. I was kind of looking at doing one of those QA jobs out at Korea or Curacao. But then this popped up, and I asked some of the firefighters I worked with who have been to Guam about that assignment. They strongly encouraged it, even though they didn't work as an instructor. And one of the firefighters that I worked with actually knew the section chief over here, and that's how I was able to link up with him. I didn't get a formal interview, but they still racked and stacked a bunch of the packages. And thankfully, I came out on top on that. So glad I did.
One of two?
No, my section chief won't tell me how many applied, but I keep asking, and he said, "Don't worry about it. You got the job."
Yeah, no. No, I mean, right fit for the job, I'm sure. And we'll talk a little bit about what you guys do there. So for those of us who haven't been in a while, or for those of us who have never been, can you guys kind of explain what Silver Flag is? What's the intent of it?
Yeah, so Silver Flag is a contingency training where we operate away from home station restraints. That's kind of like what we tell our students when they first get there. So we do a lot of things kind of outside of what you would typically do either here in garrison or probably even overseas at a home station, where you kind of have the comforts and the norms of everyday money. But what we do is a bear base buildup. So you're planning to build up a bear base to forward deploy to a fob maybe, and to actually kind of get boots on the ground, not have a lot around you, have to probably build some triple S's as your fire station, sleep in some triple S's, and kind of just work with very, very minimal things. So it's very bear based type of stuff.
And we participate with other career fields, right?
Yeah, so I know over here in Guam, we kind of make sure to drill it into all the students' heads that it's not just about establishing the fire and emergency services. It's also about hitting all the objectives for establishing that base. As Nate said, whether it's that forward deploying base or you're just taking over an airfield. We kind of, I know for myself and the other instructor I teach with, we drill it into the students' heads that in PACAF they're deployed in place, right? And we try to explain why they are deployed in place without getting too deep into it, like how the scenario they're in fits the geographical location that they're at. So trying to get firefighters to get out of that mentality of just focusing on the fire department and more about the entire base itself and what the mission is.
So when we talked on the phone before we recorded, you guys, kind of talked about a few differences that there are between the sites. I'm wondering, are those differences, do they have to do with the combatant commanders or the regional area? So in PACAF, those guys would fight a war potentially against North Korea. Are you guys tailoring the instruction to that?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a thing. So you think about PACAFs kind of dealing with PACAF type theater, USAFE same way, and then at Tyndall being on the mainland, we do get probably a lot more Guard and Reserve than the other two Silver Flags. So we are dealing with a lot of different types of firefighters that are not necessarily waking up every day putting the uniform on like we do. So I think that plays a huge role in the specifics of what we teach. Now, obviously, we're still teaching off the same WTS. We're all teaching the same curriculum, but the little bit of exercise stuff that we do in here and there is definitely it definitely plays off of what theater that they're in. Yeah.
So with the older crowd, the Guard and Reserves guys, which I say older crowd because most of them probably the average age is going to be a little bit older than an active duty guy. Do you guys as instructors try to tailor the instruction to them? Like, do you find yourself kind of, I guess, I don't want to say judging the classroom, but adjusting to the students that you have when you're teaching?
I know for us, we don't get nearly as many Guard and Reserve students, right? They mostly always go to Tyndall. We have had a handful of them every now and then, but in no way do we change the curriculum. We may spend a little more time with them because it's, us over here in the Pacific, we don't spend that much time with them. So we may need to give them a little more instruction time one-on-one. But for the most part, the Guard and Reserve students that I've came across are pretty sharp. Most of them have either been civilian firefighters or are DOD firefighters. So it's not like it's their first, time out here doing the stuff.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to imply that they don't know what they're doing, because that's certainly not the case. What I mean is that they're older, more experienced. They work on fire departments in cities. And so, you're not talking to a young guy right out of tech school, right? Or a staff sergeant with 6 years in on active duty who's, 25, 24 years old. You're talking to guys with a little bit of experience behind them. So that's what I meant. No disrespect to the Guard and Reserve guys out there. If anything, I'm kind of giving them props. You know what I mean?
I do love to work with the Guard and Reserve units that we get. And then not that the active duty firefighters that we get aren't great, but, I could get somebody that's a New York City firefighter and somebody that's an LA City firefighter. And when you have two firefighters from distinct different areas of the country that probably do things very, very different in their everyday practices. And you get to bring them together and see that experience and see how they have to try to mesh the 10 days of class and try to work together as a team and figure out how they're supposed to be doing things. I learn a lot just from the students. I'm not going to sit up here and act like I know everything just because I'm a cadre, but I mean, they're probably doing it a lot more than what we are, and being active duty fire. So we definitely get a lot from that. It's kind of cool to see some of the search and rescue techniques that they use. Seeing them, ladder every building that they come across, things that we just don't really do in the Air Force. And then on the flip side of that, even just getting active duty airmen from different parts of the country, or, if we had a couple guys from, I think, one of the England bases a couple classes ago. So, it's just kind of different practices. You would think, being active duty Air Force, we would kind of all, pretty much do the same stuff, but that's definitely not true. So bringing teams together and see how they interact and how they kind of have to form, it's a really, really good experience for them and for us.
Yeah. How cool is it to see a variety of experiences like that? Because you're not going to get that kind of interaction as a tech school instructor, because you're seeing guys straight out of basic training. Some of them, not too many, probably have prior experience, but as a silver flag instructor, you get to interact with guys who do it, all over the world or all over the country, which is pretty cool. I don't know.
Right. And some of the Guard and Reserve guys are, financial consultants on the outside. So, they could keep you in line in other ways and just teach you a little bit about firefighting as well.
On break, you'll do your taxes for you.
Right. Yeah. And it's all about networking. So
cool. Well, let's get into, what a week of training is like. It is a week, correct?
10 days. 10
days. Okay. Well, let's talk about that. What do the 10 days consist of? Does it progress to something? I assume, like a war exercise. I have been through Silver Flag. I don't want to, make it sound like I haven't. I do remember Silver Flag, but, we're trying to speak to the listeners who may have not went through. So just walk us through a training week or the training 10 days, from start to finish. Erik, you can start.
Yeah. So from day one, it's kind of just general orientation, right? We give the students a general brief of what they're coming into. We're very lucky over here to have Northwestfield, and it kind of resembles just what you would expect a forward operating base to look like with a training runway. So it brings the realism there, and plus they're already sleeping in tents, right? But after that, each craft kind of goes their own separate ways, and then we break out into our own training curriculum. For fire has the largest WTS out there. We have the most training hours by far. I think the next closest is within 15 training hours. And then that's not including any of the after hours stuff that they have to do, because they're still essentially, after we train, still building the fire department, right? They got to man their trucks, figure out how they want everything set up, figure out where they're going to establish EWSs and everything. So other than the regular curriculum, they have the fire department side that they must set up. We drill it into their heads that they need a network. Nate just brought up networking earlier, right? We emphasize the need to networking while at Silver Flag, because they don't quite understand at day one that they're going to need additional help from other services out there, or what services are available to them. Usually the first thing I'll point out is, hey, do you know you have ground trans here at Silver Flag? Because I know when I first went through Silver Flag, it was just all CE, right? And then maybe a handful of services to feed you. But, you'll say, hey, if you need bus services, Grand Trans is here, or figure out what else they can do. After that, the chief and the, whoever's the acting chief and the AC kind of have a lot of after hours work on top of the regular after hours stuff to get with C2, the command and control element, and figure out what exactly is going on the base. At Silver Flag, we say there's just a 2-day exercise portion, but really the exercise starts from the day one they get there, and it never stops until they get home, or that last, at least for us, the last IFE that they respond to. So for an instructor, we kind of show up at 7 o'clock. It always varies depending on how well the students are picking up some of the curriculum, but we don't leave till around 4 to 5 o'clock.
So you mentioned WTS a couple of times. Both of you guys did. Can you explain what that acronym is?
the wartime training standard. So that is what at a minimum should be taught. The hours are flexible, right? As long as you can meet the intent, but it is the standard for what you're supposed to be taught and what you should learn while attending Silver Flag, bare minimum, right? So in that there's like CE communications, right? Where the students learn the PRC 152s, land navigation, right? Stuff like that. I don't want to take it all away from Nathan. I'm sure he has stuff he wants to talk to.
Yeah, Nate, go ahead. What's your take, man?
Yeah, so the WTS was built off of a combination of what all three sites needed. So depending on what site you go to, I know Ramstein, they have to travel like some 45 minutes, an hour to do some of their training. So fortunately for me here at Tyndall, I have everything right here on site where I need it. It's convenient. So, I may take, let's say we're doing land navigation. That may be a 2-hour class on the WTS. It may only take me 45 minutes to teach it because I'm not having to convoy over to an area where we're going to teach them, how to read a map or whatever the case is. But yeah, it's kind of just to tack on to what a week is like or what the 10 days is like. We have a C2 class here, so we get our fire chief involved in that. So kind of what Erik was saying, the fire chief, deputy, depending on how many people we have in class, they're really planning for the exercise. At least that's how it is here at Tyndall. So we're kind of, exercising them through the week, but they're planning their bear-based buildup. So they've got to work with C2, plan on, having to probably set up an EOC at some point. But they're talking about, looking at fire demand zones, things where they're going to have to potentially deal with a split mop if you're dealing with an attack based off of what, your threat is or what your chemical threat is. They've got a plan to build a fire station. They have to set up EWSs, dispersal points for their crews. So we talk a lot about the different mop levels. We go into, how to wear your J fire, what, level you should be in based off of what your threat is or what alarm condition you're in. PRC 152, like Erik was saying, that is a really, really big one. I think probably across all three sites because it's such a foreign thing. We're used to getting Motorola's. And when you get down range and you have to program your radio and maybe combat comms not out there doing a great job and you don't understand what a frequency is, you're going to be completely lost. I don't know what Erik's dealt with, but we have a handful of students here and there that will reach back to us and say, hey, I remember coming through your PRC 152 class. It was really great. Okay, thanks. Oh, by the way, I'm over here, somewhere and I forget how to do this. Okay, cool. So, I'll get on the phone and try to help them out as best I can because we are using these downrange. We know that. And it's a part of the UTC. So it's something that we should be familiar with. So I know we have kind of some different pits. And I can get into talking about that here in a little bit, but
yeah, I want to get into that a little bit later. I got a question for you in regards to that, but just to talk on a couple things. But the training beforehand, you guys mentioned land nav and the CE communications. So are CPTs required? Are these CPTs required before they go to the training?
So they should be, according to your reporting instructions, they should be completing these CPTs beforehand.
So according to AFI 10210, we should be doing these, right? Because it's like a tier 1 type
Correct.
of course, right? And so Silver Flag would be considered what, like tier 2?
I believe it's considered a tier 3.
Tier 3, along with like combat skills and all that stuff.
Right. So I think some of the issues with the PRCs is even though it may fall into the tier 1 training, not a lot of bases have them. So Grissom's holding all the UTCs, and more than likely, like maybe your EOD at your home station is going to have PRCs, but I know our EOD here at Tyndall, they use a little bit newer version of a PRC than what we even get in the fire UTC. So that's obviously an issue. A lot of times our firefighters aren't even seeing these things until they come through Silver Flag. So it's really, really good training for them. It's good for them to see the limpacts of the radios.
And it's funny that you say that, Nate, like how most people don't see it until they get to Silver Flag. Before I came here and I was at Patrick, I had to go on a short notice humanitarian assignment to go help out in Puerto Rico. And we used UTC items for that entire humanitarian mission. So when the radios came out, last time I only been to Silver Flag once, right? That was at Tyndall like 8 years ago, right? So it's completely different than what it is now. We had Motorola's back then. I show up in Puerto Rico and there's these PRC 152s and we're all looking at each other like, this is what we got to use? Like, I'm sorry, I clicked to the CBT one too many times too fast. So, but, they're out there and I try to emphasize that to our students that this is the equipment you're going to get. Like you need to become proficient in it because you're not getting those fancy Motorola's.
Yeah. So advice to anybody out there ready to deploy might want to click through the CE Communication CPT and look at the PRC 152 stuff. Right. So you guys mentioned the fire chiefs getting together in the C2 element and having to develop a plan and build the base and find out where the fire station and the emergency water supply goes. What kind of reference material do they use for that? Or are they just kind of going off the cuff and deciding?
We have our fire chiefs utilize the TTP. We show our students mainly the NCOs and above because the airmen are more focused on other things to establish the fire department. So we show the NCOs and above that TTP, and it pretty much lays out everything you need to know for a bear base, right? For anything under 180 days of operations. So the fire chief will end up using that as a template to figure out what services he may need to establish, what kind of planning needs to be involved. Like Nate said earlier, they may try to figure out they figure out that they need another fire station because they may not be close enough to the runway. So how are they going to set up another fire station? They going to think it's going to magically appear? Because the next day, if they tell me that they need a fire station, they already coordinated it, I'll say, okay, cool. What structures say when you brought it up to them in C2? And they'll look at me with, deer in the headlights look. I'll say, well, you can't just fake it. Go plan it. Go coordinate it. So there's a lot of planning involved. Secondary water sources, right? Like, for example, if the EWSs aren't available and the hydrants, right? The hydrants at Northwest Field often go out real world. So they can't always rely on the hydrants. We'll say, hey, did you get with WIFMs to figure out what other water sources you have available? And then you try to explain the differences with gray water, all that, what they may be able to use for contingency operations. So there's a lot of planning just involved to try to get them to understand you're the fire chief. It is your responsibility to actually establish this fire department. No one's going to do it for you. We're here to help guide you, right? We're here to teach you all the correct principles and help you think outside the box, but it's all yours at the end of the day. And especially when it comes to the 2-day recovery exercise, it's your baby, right?
Yeah. Awesome.
Yep. We do use some stuff out of the WIMP as well, obviously, so your war mobilization plan. But I mean, I think Eric would agree. We don't want to give away all the secrets of what the Chiefs are going to do when they come through the planner's course. So I can't get all the answers to some flags.
Well, the document is AFTTP 3-32.41. And so if you guys are going to Silver Flag, any of you listeners, and you want the answers to the test.
Well, it's funny that you say that because and Nick can agree as well, every class is completely different, right? Just because the type of people you get, especially with the Guard and Reserve, as he pointed out, you got people from either civilian departments or just different bases, how they operate differently. So we explain to the students, don't give anything away because they may pre-plan something and we may have to change something up last minute and it completely throws them off.
For sure. I understand that 100%. So you guys mentioned that you see some issues among students, one of them being unfamiliarity with the PRC 152s. Is there any other issues that students have that are common, and what can we do about it at home station to fix the issue?
Yeah, I'm going to do my best to not make every training manager in the Air Force upset about this, but probably one of the biggest things that I see is just we can tell people aren't reading the reporting instructions before they come. So a big issue that we have is firefighters not bringing their second stage regulators, which it clearly says in your reporting instructions. So if you're hearing this, if you're sending your people, you can go to the AFCEC SharePoint site and they have current reporting instructions on there. So please read through those. I don't know if the UDMs are always, given the most current copy, but obviously coming for training, you're going to need your second stage. I also see a lot of APRs not coming in the bags either. So that's a really good place to start for me because I see that probably more often than anything else. We can train, and I can train you out of bad habits all day. But if you're not coming with the correct equipment, then that's starting me issues right off the bat.
So if you show up without your second stage, you got to do 1,000 burpees while you're there.
I would say that just actually conducting the training at home station. And when I say that, I myself am guilty of that as well back when I was at my other bases, right? We have Prime D beef days, right? Prime beef days are dedicated to readiness training per the commander, right? But then sometimes, and I know the fire department life, right? We've all been in the fire, both Nathan and I have been in the fire department. Something else takes priority, whether it's, oh, guess what? We forgot to do hose testing. It's all got to be done because it's all due, or whatever tasker, right? Just actually conducting the readiness training and reaching out to somebody just out. It may even be outside of the fire department to teach a simple course, right? Whether it's triple S, right? If you need to learn how to set up a tent, right? Because that's something we do over here. Reaching out to somebody in CE for that. It's as simple as that. Even reviewing the actual CBTs and not clicking through them. When you come to Silver Flag, yeah, we're going to teach you some of the stuff, but we don't have enough time in the day to make you proficient to the point where, you can go teach this forever after on, right? We only have so much time in the day, so many instructors, and then the students have other objectives to meet as well. So just actually conducting the training at home station. I know I'm probably going to get hate for that, but like I said, I myself am part of the problem as well, or was part of the problem, right?
Well, it's simple enough.
A big thing I see is just properly wearing J-Fire gear. So this kind of goes along with what Eric was saying, but that's tier 1 training. We should know how to put our fire gear on top of our mop gear or on top of our CPR or JS list. I mean, that's a fairly basic thing. I don't know if they're still doing that in tech school. I think I maybe remember doing that in tech school. It's been a while. But I mean, if we're sending firefighters downrange and they get themselves, or not really themselves, but if someone puts them in a situation where they're going to have to go into MOP 4 and potentially even go and firefight, maybe not likely to do interior, but if they're going to go into MOP 4 non-firefighting or firefighting, they need to know how to wear that gear. It's designed to protect them in those circumstances. And if they don't know how to properly do that, they're exposing themselves. So, I mean, we do a fairly extensive J-Fire class at Tyndall. I'm sure probably all 3 sites do it because it is a WTS requirement that we have. We do interior burns with our students and J-Fire, so they get to see how taxing it can be, both physically and mentally, to have to wear that gear, all that extra heat, all that extra weight, and go in there. And then not only that, but I think, Eric, you guys are doing this out at Guam too, but I know that we take our students out of a building after fighting fire and pulling dummies and tell them, like, hey, you can't pull your second stage regulator out of your face. You're still in, you still may be in it, right? So you've got to go down. You got to maybe process through a CCA or do some sort of emergency decon, but you can't come out and just start ripping your gear off. And that's just an exercisism, I think, that we probably do in the Air Force. Is as soon as you step out of that IDLH, you want to start taking your stuff off. And in a CBurn, you can't do that. You're going to have to process through and make sure that you're not contaminated, or else you're going to be doing a lot of damage to yourself, depending on what it is.
Yeah, man, that's a great point. Excellent point. I don't know if you guys listened to the episode we had with Travis Bender and Chris Boykley. They talked a lot about creating these mental models of doing the right thing while you're on an emergency scene. And if you practice something like taking off your second stage regulator in a chemical environment, you're going to do it if you're in a chemical environment. You practice how you play, right? So yeah, that's an interesting point. Because in a typical structure fire, you're going to be able to, for the most part, take that thing off once you exit the IDLH. Not the case for a J-Fire or chemical environment. It's pretty. So from what I'm hearing, it just sounds like people need to do their training, do their net readiness training, do what they're supposed to do, pay attention to the CPTs, learn about the radios. Am I right?
Yeah, there's been discussions where, hey, can Silver Flag kind of just be done at home station and then you evaluate whether or not they met all the requirements and then give Silver Flag credit? I don't ever see that happening, just because what we teach at Silver Flag is all the skills that aren't being taught or being conducted at home station. So unless it does get fixed, right, you're always going to be sent to Silver Flag before a deployment, preferably before a deployment or every 3 years, right?
Mm-hmm. So we covered a lot of things that people can work on in regards to preparing for Silver Flag and some issues that could be fixed home station before they arrive. Is there anything else that you want to mention?
Yeah, I'd like to mention just understanding what some of the other AFSCs bring to the table in regards to both Silver Flag and that contingency operation. For example, right, when someone hears of a fire department, a firefighter, people expect you to do it all, right? you're the jack of all trades, master of none is what I always hear, right? So everybody expects, and when I say everybody, like the C2 element kind of expects the fire department to have the same capabilities as you do back at home station because they don't know any better, right? But that's not the case. So just having an understanding of when you can delegate some of the other responsibilities to other agencies. For example, EM, right? EM, they're also capable to do some hazmat stuff. So instead of trying to stretch yourself thin and also cover hazmat emergencies, maybe just completely turn that over to them, right? Just knowing what people are capable around you, right? What you have available, the resources.
Just to kind of tack onto that, I think it's on the flip side, it's also important that the other crafts are stressed the same thing. And so sometimes you don't always see that, but you think about, let's say we're working with EM and EOD during an attack. All right, well, we should be the incident commanders on scene, right? 2 or more agencies. So a lot of times you may see EOD want to just kind of freelance and deal with that on, themselves. And that's not the way that you should do it. And that's not the way that you would do it. So, working with the other agencies, I think that's huge, not just in the C2 element, but, realizing the capabilities, like Erik was saying, of all the other crafts out there. And for us as fire, that's important to realize, like, what do I have out here that I can utilize? Can I train, some people to be auxiliary firefighters if need be? Can I train some dirt boys to make some fire breaks if we've got, something pop off, they're trained in heavy equipment, so knowing kind of what you have to work for you is also important. And you're going to learn something like that in Silver Flag because you're almost forced by us to work with all these other crafts where you would normally just kind of keep to yourselves. You know how we are, we're kind of reserved. So yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, that's what the expectation is going to be if you are in a deployed environment, especially Bear Base. Like all hands on deck, man. Grab a weapon and go hit your post and do sentry duty. I think the same thing applies with some of those CE trades. Like, hey, do you know how to operate a 10K forklift? Can you move this rock from here to here? Yeah, I think that's a great point to drive home. So transition a little bit with COVID-19. Everybody's changing the way they do business, right? Which I'm sure Silver Flag is in the same boat. So what kind of adjustments have you guys made as a result of the pandemic?
Well, I'll take this one first. So we're normally doing more classes than the other 2 sites because they're teaching rescue and a couple other things. So we were off for almost 6-7 months, not able to teach classes. We got a little bit behind on that, but now that we are back to doing it, we're still kind of taking a hit as far as our numbers are concerned. My max class size used to be 24 students with the ability to flex up a few if I had a couple firefighters that, were short tasking to Korea. Right now, my max class size is 12, and I have a class on the ground right now that I only have 9 firefighters here. So it is a huge impact on us to have that diminished number, because when we're talking about, being able to do, even just staffing the trucks on exercise day is going to be more taxing on everyone that's involved. And then another thing is obviously the 6-foot distance that we try to keep. I don't know if Erik, I don't know if you've taught any classes since the pandemic, but we're having to wear our masks all the time. So even when we are up in the front of the class instructing, we're wearing our masks. Students are wearing their masks as much as they possibly can. So it's we're following CDC guidelines, which is what we're supposed to do. But it's a lot different. The training is not affected as much as far as what we're actually doing, aside from just the hit on the numbers of students that we have. Even having 12 students, maybe a little bit more realistic in the exercise sense of what your bear base or your forward deployment may look like. But as far as trying to keep the readiness numbers up from the fire perspective, it's going to be hard to kind of catch up the lost time that we have. And I can't really see it changing anytime soon unless COVID-19 just goes away, and I don't think that's going to happen. So our numbers, at least at Tyndall, will probably stay down for a little bit, and in the long run, I think that's gonna hurt us.
Yeah, just like Nate mentioned, we haven't started class yet. We're looking to start class back in January. We had a different couple of COAs though, where we would teach MTTs as long as the bases had the equipment, right? We can bring some of the equipment with us, but some of the heavier items or some of the items that can't be transported, the base had to have. So we originally were looking at doing one in Korea, but their trainers were down, and we can't teach without burning, right? That's one of the critical items that you do in Silver Flag. That ended up getting canceled. However, now we're getting ready to go to Yokota to go teach a Silver Flag course there. we're trying to do our best with what we can. Unfortunately, for us, we've had to go without class a little longer. They started class already, but even once we do start class, our class size has gone from 18 to 7 now with the protective measures, right? And Nate said it already, with 9 people, it's already tough, right? 7 firefighters, it's going to be tough, but they're going to have to make it work. Obviously, we're not going to put them through as much as what we would do a normal class, but we're still going to keep the quality of training up there, right? That will never be lower.
Yeah, so 12 at Tyndall. I mean, 12, you're talking about an engine, 2 crash trucks, command and control, rescue.
We've been doing tanker, just to have that extra water on scene.
And so with 7, I mean, maybe an engine, crash truck, 2 crash trucks and a chief 2, something like that. You use a P19 Bravo or something?
Yeah, we have a P19 Bravo, 2 alphas, and this is just what we have, but they'll probably end up using the new UHP we just got, and maybe the alpha and the tender is what they'll use.
Is it a UHP, like a Riv?
The Rosenbauer, so we just got a new Rosenbauer, what is it? The UHP P19 is what they call it. So we'll be looking at implementing that for the first time in our next class. That thing looks like a Cadillac, right? But I don't know how long it'll last on these deployment roads out there at Northwestfield.
So I have an interesting plug. So right now we're using these, humongous UHP strikers, which are not even deployable. We used to have 3 of them. We sent one of them to Africa like a year and a half ago, and they had to take that thing over on a ship because couldn't get it on an airplane. When we're talking about readiness and for deploying bear-based type of stuff, probably not practical to be using those UHPs that we have. But this is kind of neat. We do have the new E1 air transportable P19. From my understanding, they are sending one of them to California for the maintenance tech school or whatever, so that they can kind of learn how to work on that truck. The only other one that I know of that's staying stateside is here at Tyndall Silver Flag. So right now we're working on trying to put a lesson plan forward so that we can probably not certify, but we can actually, expose the students that are coming through. Because all the other ones are already downrange, and I don't know if they're in service yet or not, but once they are, nobody's going to be able to train with them unless you're either downrange or coming through, Tyndall Silver Flag. So that's going to be a pretty neat thing that we can look forward to here in the short future.
What do you think about that truck? What's your first impression?
So I haven't got to play around with it yet. Let's see, 2 weeks from now, E1's actually going to come out and run all of our cadre through the course. So I've been instructed to not even look at it because I don't want it to break. But yeah, I'll let you know once we get to play around with it a little bit. I think it's going to be pretty cool. It kind of looks like an old P19 in person. Obviously, you can drop the suspension down so they can get it on all this other cool stuff. But yeah, I'll be interested to see it. It's not UHP. So it's going to be a little bit different from what we've been training here at Tyndall for the last couple of years.
Yeah, look forward to that thing hitting the streets. I think it looks cool, but hopefully it works just as good as it looks. But you know what I mean.
For people who are interested in looking for some of that material, it's actually on the FES SharePoint. There's a lot of good useful information on it already on there, and I know we kind of incorporated it into our regular P19 class where we show them how to do the all the stuff to make it transportable. So there's a lot of good information on there if you're just curious about it, because the only time you're going to see it is at Tyndall. Well, I think they may have one at USAFE also, but unfortunately we do not have one.
So Nate, we talked before, you were talking about the use of foam on JP8 fires at the Tyndall Flag site. So can you explain, why that's significant?
Yeah, so a couple of reasons. When I got here 3 years ago, we were training with JP8 and foam in the pit, and I thought it was fantastic training because I don't know about you guys, but I've never got to use foam in a training environment. Some people maybe they have, but it's kind of frowned upon. So that was, aside from the PRC 152, that was probably the most valued thing that we had coming through Tyndall Silver Flag, was actually being able to teach these firefighters how to use foam on a fuel fire, which is kind of rare. I think it was it Travis a couple of years ago that had that Cessna flip upside down, and when the ribs got on scene, they put water on it. So, we talked a little bit about exercise isms earlier on, but when you're constantly training with water and then something happens and, in your muscle memory saying, all right, I guess I'm putting water on it. Well, that's not always going to be the case. So I think, being able to train with foam is it's an important thing really for any of us to do, because it's setting that mindset that, hey, I can use this. I've trained with it before, so I don't really need to be scared of it, right? So kind of a little bit of a backstory. We were having some issues with too much water in our pit. We had a lot of rain a couple of years ago. So we were having to actually try to burn off some of the water with incinerators. Then Hurricane Michael hit, took our pit down for a little bit. So for about a year, we were training on a kiddie helo trainer, which was just not, I mean, that's kind of all that we had to do aircraft training, which was still a part of our WTS. So probably about a year we've been back training in the pit, which has been good. But we've been just using propane and not using any foam. So Congress slapped us down and said, hey, you're not going to be training with foam anymore. It's just not safe for the environment. And, Air Force Fire, we've been constantly trying to create this foam that we think that, is going to be safe for us to use, and this other PFOS stuff. But the pit that we have right now is actually pretty cool. We can, have some ground fires in there. It's all propane, like I said. But the ground fire, they can kind of spread. So if they're coming in using turrets or even using hand lines, they can kind of push the flames around a little bit, and it's kind of supposed to emulate as if you were actually doing fuel fire. But on the up and up, we did just recently get an approval from Congress. There's like 5 DoD bases that are going to get to use foam, and Tyndall is one of those bases. So right now, I think we're still kind of trying to work out all the little kinks. That's way above my pay grade. But once they tell me that I can use foam again, we're going to start putting JP8 back in that pit and using foam, which I think like I said, is really, really great training. So when we're talking about UHPs, I think it's super important, because a lot of Air Force firefighters are not sold on the UHP yet, right? The ultra high pressure. If you have a rib at your base, you're probably like, this thing is garbage. You can't even hose off the pad with it without wind blowing it everywhere. But when you're actually putting foam out of that thing, it does a lot more. And when you're actually pulling hand lines and shooting foam out of a hand line, even with ultra high pressure, it makes a huge difference. So that's something that, like I said, I think that training was so great for us at Tyndall when we used to do it, because we could sell a lot of people on UHP. And I think I like to think that we were kind of turning the attitudes a little bit towards believing in the stuff that we have, and believing in the things that we may have to use on an everyday basis. So it's a little bit different probably than how we were trained to use foam with the rain down, bank down, all that kind of stuff. It's not as much about kind of creating that blanket and trying not to disturb it. It's a little bit different technique. You're wanting to use a little bit straighter stream, slower sweeps, kind of some weird stuff. But if you've never done that and you've never got to use it, you're not going to know. And if you're trying to use those old methods of not using an ultra high pressure system, it is a little bit different. It's slightly confusing. So once we get that back, I think that's going to be great. Now, with talking about that new E1 air transportable not being UHP, and the likelihood of using UHP downrange, probably not. But going back to home stations, that's definitely some super value training I think that we can provide. And with being only 5 DoD, sites, and us being one of them, that's big for us here at Tyndall.
It sounds like UHP would be a good idea for a bear base, just in terms of water conservation. But I could be off on that. Yeah, I mean, we've talked relatively extensively on this podcast on other episodes about UHP, and I'm actually trying to get an expert on to talk UHP, not to sell anybody, just to bring a scientist that can speak from a neutral place, a scientific place, to kind of explain the technology. So we'll talk with Erik, man. You mentioned to us joint training, and I'm just curious, who are you training with, I guess, beyond Air Force folks?
So it really just depends on who we have available at the Silver Flag site during the course. Sometimes we'll get some Navy Seabees out there as well. But really just in regards to joint training, it was just all the different agencies that we actually have the opportunity to play with, right? I think a lot of us have experienced a lot of exercise simulations or stuff like that, where you request an agency and then somebody comes up to you, taps you on the shoulder, say, hey, they're en route, or, don't worry about them. They said they got something else to do. Over here, there's none of that. So if on an exercise, the command element requests an EOD personnel because they figured out that the fire they just put out on a vehicle had VIED on it, they all immediately evacuate, and they say, okay, we're calling EOD. And I'll stare at them and I say, okay, we'll call EOD, and then they'll stare back, and it'll be a completely new experience for them because they're not used of actually going through the steps to notify another agency where they didn't take the steps to figure out how they would get a hold of these people and that environment, right? That contingency environment. So they will experience that for the first time, get to see how an emergency will actually unfold. You know, a lot of us will just sometimes say, hey, call EOD. Okay, EOD already pre-staged at this building anyway because they knew this exercise was going to happen. They get here, they do their task, and then it's over within a couple of minutes, right? Whereas over here, it takes the full duration, hour, 2 hours to completely unfold an emergency and figure out what's going to happen, what goes on. If command realizes, okay, we don't need certain resources here anymore, so I can send some people back to cover the flight line while I stay back for the whole IC element. And it's not just EOD. I just use that as an example, right? But we do it with EOD, EM, services, ground trans, and some of the heavy equipment and structural apprentices out here. It all depends on the emergency, but we force them to actually take those steps that they say they're going to take and act on them, right? So, for instance, on our helo crash, right, one of the days we have a helo crash, and they go do their portion, and then there's one body where it's dead on arrival, right? Limbs everywhere and everything. So we ask the IC, what do you do? Do you touch the dead person, or do you know who to call afterwards? And a lot of the times what we see is people don't understand services handles the mortuary affairs portion, right? Or that they have a search and recovery team specifically for that. So our students see a lot of different capabilities that we bring to the fight, right? It's not just, hey, services only serves food out at the range. They give me my MRE and water bottle. That's not the case at all. They do a lot more that goes unnoticed or goes underappreciated, right? The same with ground trans. We have an exercise set up where it's a expeditionary low angle rescue, and it's a Humvee that's ended up rolled over down in a ditch. Well, security forces just called and said they still need that Humvee because they only have so many assets. So I see the commander's telling you that you need to figure out how to get this. Do you know who you call? And then we actually have ground trans come over with their wrecker and recover the vehicle. And IC's there, obviously, for the IC element to make sure no one gets hurt, to make sure that they can get down there safely, hooked up. So we try our best to eliminate any simulations out here and to actually get that joint agency exercise, because the feedback we get at the end of the course and also after any kind of exercise is that this stuff isn't happening back at home station. And I can understand why it's not, because everybody thinks they have something important going on, right, to them, right? A firefighter, right? I have something going on that may be safety related, or that an emergency just happened. Don't bother me, right? We're going to the flight line, IFE, some engine went down, right? So I guess to kind of help better show students that, you can rely on other agencies to do other tasks, we try to bring that over here with that joint training.
Okay, so when you say joint training, interagency within the Air
Right.
Force, okay, so I misinterpreted or I misunderstood when you said that, which is still awesome. That's an awesome thing to integrate, just as you were if you were at a Bear Base. You mentioned Navy Seabees, though. Navy Seabees are basically the naval equivalent to engineers, right?
Oh, yeah.
Cool. So I know each of your times are going to be coming up soon. For those who may be interested, explain what it's like as an instructor. I mean, you've already kind of alluded to what it's like. Is there anything else worth mentioning that somebody should know?
Yeah, so I'll just advertise my position. So we'll be hiring a tech at Tyndall Silver Flag site. I think the ad is probably going to go out probably by the end of this year. Next year, probably about mid-year next year, we'll be hiring a staff. So if anybody's out there that's interested, look for it on AMS. But I would say probably one of the biggest words of advice that I could give off of my time here as an instructor is be ready to work. Kind of like what Erik was saying, they show up at 7 o'clock in the morning and work till 5 o'clock in the evening. It's not cushy and easy like you would think that it would be. You've got to come and do work. I know at Tyndall we're a part of a Red Horse detachment, but it's all NCOs, senior NCOs out there. So you don't. This is bad, but you don't have any airmen to say, hey, go out and do this. If we don't have students here to put the trucks back in place, do this other stuff, set up for a class. It's like, we're doing that. We as the NCOs, we're doing that stuff. So you have to come kind of hungry. You have to come to want to work. And really what we're going to be looking for is somebody that wants to make the career field better and make a difference. We're always looking for fresh ideas. I always tell my new cadre when they come in, like, hey, don't think that you are new and that you should be quiet. You're coming from, a base where maybe you have done things a little bit differently than what anybody else has done things. Maybe you have, some bear base experience that you can have and say, hey, this, I've done this downrange. That's not the way that we do things. And then, we're going to listen, and then we'll make adjustments because, across the 3 sites, and I'll speak for all of us, we want to give the most valued and relevant training that we can. And if we're training something that nobody is doing, then we're missing the mark. So we're looking for some experience. I mean, we would like to, I personally don't have a lot of good deployment experience. They still hired me. Maybe it's from my charming good looks. I don't know, but I know a lot of my guys, they've been to Jordan, Africa, Syria, Kyrgyzstan. So they've set up FOBs, they've set up bear bases. They've done a lot of this stuff with very minimal equipment, and the stories that they tell in class is second to none, and it's added value to the training that we give. So it's kind of busy. Every single day I go to work, I have an idea of what I would like to get accomplished, and none of that happens ever. Because you get in, whether you're on an up week with class or not, you just get in there and there's just so much stuff to be done. So I really, really enjoy it. I think it's fun. This is probably one of the better jobs in Air Force Fire. It's kind of a hidden gem. I think it's not considered a DSD. It's just kind of a special duty because you are staying, within your career field. Us at Tyndall here, we're T-coded, so you're not going to be called upon to deploy, or you shouldn't be unless, World War III is kicking off. But we do have a lot of opportunities to, go to a Goodfellow for classes. So we've secured some, Officer 2, Officer 3 types of spots. So, we're still encouraging that, the firefighters out here, the cadre out here are attempting to continue the progression of their careers. So you don't come here and do 3 or 4 years and then get back into the career field and be completely lost. Here at Tyndall, we do a 36 months. But you do have the option to extend for 4 years. Not everybody really gets that option, but I haven't ever seen anybody be turned down from it. So it's a controlled tour. You're going to be here for 3 to 4 years, traveling a little bit, not as much as the other 2 sites, but this Panama City is built back up again. For a while, it was a non-accompanied orders, so I think that turned a lot of people off. We hired 2 guys within the last year, and we didn't get quite as many applicants as we normally do. So if people are interested in the job, it's just like a normal base again. I mean, they're still rebuilding stuff, but the site for the most part is up and going. We're back to doing what we're supposed to be doing mission-wise.
Yeah, I was stationed at Tyndall. That was my first duty station. I absolutely love that place. It's a fantastic place to live. It doesn't have any trees like it used to, from what I've seen, but it's still probably a beautiful place, and there's still a beach. Eric, you have anything to add?
If people are interested in the position over here, besides Silver Flag, we also teach rescue, so we'll end up traveling for that. But we only do that during typhoon season when Silver Flag has to shut down for safety reasons. Kind of like what Nathan said, you are essentially a fire department still. You still have to do all of the programs, right? You have to do hose testing, PPE, all the SCBA stuff. Unfortunately, we don't get to have some of the manning that they have. I'm really jealous about what they have over there at Tyndall because everything's on site, or they have more people. So if you end up wanting to apply to the PACAF's position, just understand that you'll end up working long days. Not that they don't work long days, right? But it's only mainly 2 of you trying to maintain a lot of the programs because the section chiefs are usually tasked with a lot of different taskers, right? Mass sergeants are just constantly getting hit with different things over here. We're unique. I don't know if you're attached to the CRG over there, Nate, but we're over here. We're attached to the contingency response group. So sometimes we'll get interesting requests. Like we recently were requested to load one of our P19s and fly around with it to show capabilities and stuff. So, and actually land on the runway over here at Northwest Field. So it was the first time in 7 years that we got to land fixed wing aircraft over there. We were supposed to go support another training exercise off to one of the islands out there in the Pacific. So you'll get different opportunities. But the primary mission will always be Silver Flag here, just like everywhere else, right? We're trying to maintain the skills for the war fighters out here. But come hungry, right? It's not an easy job by any means, but just like Nate said, I love it. It's been one of my favorite jobs. You get to interact with so many different people, get to see how people operate differently. And as you've seen it all unfold, it's a lot of things that you can put in your own toolbox. So then that way, when you go back to the fire department, you're like, you come with a lot of knowledge that you just saw from different classes, right? And that's one of the biggest takeaways.
Yeah, I've learned so much about CE in the 3 years that I've been. I mean, there's things that I probably should have known I got here as a staff that I just didn't learn at my last base. And being able to walk away with that knowledge, if you're coming here as a staff, and maybe even as a tech, I mean, you're going to know a lot of probably what your peers are out in the field. So I'm not by any means saying that that's making us better than anybody else, but you acquire a lot of really useful knowledge out of what CE and FSS's capabilities are. Even at an everyday, home station base.
Man, the opportunity, it sounds fantastic. And like you guys alluded to, I think it would make you just a better NCO, better firefighter, a better engineer following your time there. So you guys are going to go back to the force and you're going to be a hell of a resource. I'd love to have either one of you or any of your cadre deploy with me. Like, hey, show me how this radio works, dude. Give us a class real quick, Well, guys, I really appreciate your time. Shared a lot of valuable information in regards to Silver Flag. Is there any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
I got one. I usually say it anytime I can. Is just to make sure always check up on your people, right? Over here, there's only 3 firefighters assigned to Red Horse over here. So we're very small, tight knit. But I mean, I remember back when I was at a department, I'd always just tell people to check up on everybody. I know there was recently another death in the career field. So, just reach out to somebody, ask how someone's day is going, and it might be the highlight of their week. You never know. Just we're all in one big family, right? One big Air Force Fire Department family. Let's treat each other that way.
Yeah, that's great, Eric. Mine is on a little bit different note, but I kind of alluded to this earlier, but we're constantly looking for feedback. So, if you've deployed, we get feedback from every class, but if you've deployed recently, bear base, and you think that you have some information that may help make our class a little bit better, if you've been through the class, like I was kind of saying earlier, and say, hey, we don't really do that downrange, or we did this. I know you guys teach it this way. This is what we did and it worked, or whatever. So, again, we want to make this training the best that we can for our career field. We are here for our career field, right? So we want to make them the best warfighters that we can. If they have to come through and see us in the process of getting over there to do, what they've been trained to do, we want to make that the best training that we possibly can. A lot of people, I don't really think, like to come through Silver Flag, and I think that all 3 sites have done a fantastic job at making this training a little bit more enjoyable. We also obviously want it to be as relevant as it can. I know when I first got here, we were still teaching how to call in the 9 line. And I think we started asking the question, has any Air Force firefighter ever called in the 9 line? If you're out there and you're listening, please email me. I'm on the global, because I would like to know, because that's something that we kind of took out of our curriculum, because I just don't think it was relevant anymore. You're typically, probably going to be with an Army unit or somebody who's going to be a little bit more capable of doing something like that. So we're constantly changing what we do based off of the feedback that we get from the career field. So please throw your ideas at me. I'm on the global. I'm sure Eric would take ideas too. We're teaching the same stuff, but we're all a part of the process of changing it and making it better. So we want to make it, we want to make it what everybody else wants it to be within reason. That's my pitch: is shoot me an email, get a hold of me some way, shape, or form, and let me know if you've got some information out there that I could use to make our training better than what it already is. And it's already fantastic training.
Yeah, man, good plug. And, we're transitioning kind of to a more enduring posture for the most part in our contingency places, and so, we may need to adjust our training accordingly. Not to say that we don't need bear base type of training, because we certainly need that. But, the Department of Defense focus is kind of shifting to near peer adversaries. And does that change the way we do business as firefighters? Maybe.
So we're definitely reevaluating, kind of to allude to what you said, Matt. I mean, we're taking into consideration that sustainment is probably kind of the direction that we're headed. And so how can we kind of posture our training, not as much about, ordering UTCs for a bear base, but arriving at a base that may already have some stuff and how to get what we need and how to build on that. So yeah, that's a great point. And we're tracking that stuff too.
Well, gentlemen, again, I really appreciate your time. A lot of good information.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
All right, brother. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Fire Dog Podcast. You can find more content and episodes just like this regularly posted on our Facebook page at facebook.com/the Fire Dog Podcast and on our Instagram page at the Fire Dog Podcast. That is the Fire, DAWG Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and follow so that you can stay plugged into every episode. And lastly, don't forget to share this podcast with your friends and coworkers on social media or at the firehouse. This is Matt Wilson with guests Nathan Hutslar and Erik Montes. Until next time, stay safe.